Welcome to another video from Yenkna PCs. This time we're going to look at another language for websites called CSS. Now my IEI is going to take over. Here you go.
Cascading Style Sheets, CSS, is a style sheet language used for describing the presentation of a document written in a markup language. Although most often used to set the visual style of web pages and user interfaces written in HTML and XHTML, the language can be applied to any XML document, including plain XML, SVG, and XUL, and is applicable to rendering in speech, or on other media. Along with HTML and JavaScript, CSS is a cornerstone technology used by most websites to create visually engaging web pages, user interfaces for web applications, and user interfaces for many mobile applications. CSS is designed primarily to enable the separation of presentation and content, including aspects such as the layout, colors, and fonts. This separation can improve content accessibility, provide more flexibility and control in the specification of presentation characteristics, enable multiple HTML pages to share formatting by specifying the relevant CSS in a separate .css file, and reduce complexity and repetition in the structural content. Separation of formatting and content makes it possible to present the same markup page in different styles for different rendering methods, such as on-screen, in print, by voice, via speech-based browser or screen reader, and on braille-based tactile devices. It can also display the web page differently depending on the screen size or viewing device. Readers can also specify a different style sheet, such as a CSS file stored on their own computer, to override the one the author specified. Changes to the graphic design of a document, or hundreds of documents, can be applied quickly and easily, by editing a few lines in the CSS file they use, rather than by changing markup in the documents. The CSS specification describes a priority scheme to determine which style rules apply if more than one rule matches against a particular element. In this so-called cascade, priorities, or weights, are calculated and assigned to rules, so that the results are predictable. The CSS specifications are maintained by the World Wide Web Consortium, W3C. Internet Media Type, MIME Type, Text/CSS is registered for use with CSS by RFC 2318, March 1998. The W3C operates a free CSS validation service for CSS documents. Before CSS, nearly all presentational attributes of HTML documents were contained within the HTML markup. All font colors, background styles, element alignments, orders, and sizes had to be explicitly described, often repeatedly, within the HTML. CSS lets authors move much of that information to another file, the style sheet, resulting in considerably simpler HTML. For example, headings, H1 elements, subheadings, H2, subheadings, H3, etc., are defined structurally using HTML. In print and on the screen, choice of font, size, color, and emphasis for these elements is presentational. Before CSS, document authors who wanted to assign such typographic characteristics to, say, all H2 headings had to repeat HTML presentational markup for each occurrence of that heading type. This made documents more complex, larger, and more error-prone and difficult to maintain. CSS allows the separation of presentation from structure. CSS can define color, font, text alignment, size, borders, spacing, layout and many other typographic characteristics, and can do so independently for on-screen and printed views. CSS also defines non-visual styles, such as reading speed and emphasis for oral text readers. The W3C has now deprecated the use of all presentational HTML markup. CSS information can be provided from various sources. These sources can be the web browser, the user, and the author. The information from the author can be further classified into inline, media type, importance, selector specificity, rule order, inheritance, and property definition. CSS style information can be in a separate document or it can be embedded into an HTML document. Multiple style sheets can be imported. Different styles can be applied depending on the output device being used. For example, the screen version can be quite different from the printed version, so that authors can tailor the presentation appropriately for each medium. The style sheet with the highest priority controls the content display. Declarations not set in the highest priority source are passed on to a source of lower priority, such as the user agent style. This process is called cascading. One of the goals of CSS is to allow users greater control over presentation. Someone who finds red italic headings difficult to read may apply a different style sheet. Depending on the browser and the website, a user may choose from various style sheets provided by the designers, or may remove all added styles and view the site using the browser's default styling, or may override just the red italic heading style without altering other attributes. Specificity refers to the relative weights of various rules. It determines which styles apply to an element when more than one rule could apply. Based on specification, a simple selector, e.g. H1, has a specificity of 1, class selectors have a specificity of 10, and ID selectors a specificity of 100. Because the specificity values do not carry over as in the decimal system, commas are used to separate the digits. A CSS rule having 11 elements and 11 classes would have a specificity of 1111, not 121. Inheritance is a key feature in CSS. It relies on the ancestor-descendant relationship to operate. Inheritance is the mechanism by which properties are applied not only to a specified element, but also to its descendants. Inheritance relies on the document tree, which is the hierarchy of XHTML elements in a page based on nesting. Descendant elements may inherit CSS property values from any ancestor element enclosing them. In general, descendant elements inherit text-related properties, but box-related properties are not inherited. Properties that can be inherited are color, font, letter spacing, line height, list style, text align, text indent, text transform, visibility, white space and word spacing. Properties that cannot be inherited are background, border, display, float and clear, height and width, margin, min and max height and width, outline, overflow, padding, position, text decoration, vertical align and z-index. Inheritance can be used to avoid declaring certain properties over and over again in a style sheet, allowing for shorter CSS. Inheritance in CSS is not the same as inheritance in class-based programming languages, where it is possible to define class B as like class A, but with modifications. With CSS, it is possible to style an element with class A, but with modifications. However, it is not possible to define a CSS class B like that, which could then be used to style multiple elements.
Thank you, AI. This was a video telling you about CSS and what does it do. I hope you found this video educational. Please hit that like button. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe and see you later.